Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, Newport Film, and Half Street Group.
Bartholomew Town.
Pat Crowley is the president of the AFL-CIO here in Rhode Island and organized a rally at a Tesla facility that's actually really close to where our studio is. It's basically, for anybody who's not familiar, it's Mashpog Commons. It used to be a Stop and Shop, and it's sort of in the Reservoir Triangle area. Elmwood Avenue and Reservoir Avenue is roughly where they intersect by Mashpog Pond, and it abuts shares a parking lot with the Jorge Alvarez School in Providence. And this rally took place on Saturday. Inclusive of many speakers were Senators Reid and Whitehouse. Congressman Amo was there. Of course, Pat himself spoke. And look, there were nobody set the building on fire. Nobody set any Teslas on fire. It was a peaceful protest. And by the way, this facility owned by former Providence mayor and ambassador to Malta and sort of all around Providence politico, Joe Paolino. Pat joins us today here on the podcast. Thanks for the time. Your takeaway from this rally that took place on Saturday.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. One correction, I actually didn't speak at the rally.
Oh, well, excuse me.
Yeah, no, we wanted to emphasize a different cast of leaders, rank and file workers. So we had a teacher, a nurse, a social worker, a teamster, and so we wanted to emphasize a painter. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just people at the top that care about this, that it's a rank and file movement.
Mm-hmm. And it really is, because obviously what's happening right now from the standpoint of, look, is there an element of bloated government waste and I don't know if you want to use the word fraud that may exist inside the federal government? Okay, sure. But this notion that Elon Musk, a billionaire, comes in and basically buys his way into the Oval Office, now has unconstitutional and unprecedented authority, even though they say it's not authority, to make massive changes to social services and beyond. I mean, this is something that upends so much of what our country's built on. And when you look at the history of labor movements in particular, what you have here is somebody coming in and saying, you know what, we're going to privatize as much as we can. We're going to undermine workers' rights, and we're going to make life more difficult for whatever's left of the middle class. So your overall assessment of why you chose to do this rally at a Tesla facility is pretty obvious on the nose, but give us the rundown and the tie between this moment and people's reaction to it. Not everybody, but a lot of people, including Republicans, by the way. We see it at these town hall meetings where people are outraged about what's happening. Why did you choose to do this rally at the Tesla facility?
Well, we wanted to set a contrast between a public school and a corporate-owned dealership, or car dealership, and basically try to frame it as, which side are you on? Are you on the side of students, of teachers, of people that rely on public services, or are you on the side of a corporate billionaire who's looking to line his own pockets, quite frankly, by distributing, propaganda and redistributing the people's wealth up to the top? And that's why this location was chosen. It was a perfect juxtaposition of the fight that we're in today. Yeah,
it really is, with the school and with the facility itself. There's something you said yesterday. You had a conversation with Dan York on WPRO, which I'm the producer of the show and guest host. And look, you raised a good point, which is this isn't a specific effort to target those who have done business with Elon Musk. Let's say maybe you own a Tesla or you own Starlink or something like that. This isn't necessarily to call out individuals and shame them. Again, it may be a wise decision from where you spend your dollars to go in different directions. But this is really about Elon Musk, and it's really about a moment in time that seems unprecedented. Expand on that notion if you could.
Yeah, it really is. One of the things that Dan and I talked about yesterday was how hard it is to break through the noise that just seems to surround the Trump administration and Musk, especially in some of the other media outlets. I mean, WPRO has been great in terms of trying to get the story out and listening to opinions across the spectrum. But when we look at the national media landscape, it is so bombarded with what Trump and Musk are trying to do, and trying to get the actual real story, the stories of the everyday people that are impacted by what they're actually doing. It's really hard to break through that noise. And we thought that one of the ways that we could do that is hold a rally, make the juxtaposition between which side are you on, and get the voices of the people that are directly impacted out into the audience and out into the atmosphere.
What is next for this type of movement? It seems like you've got the James Carville model, which is hurry up and wait. This thing is going to collapse. The Musk is eventually going to wear out his welcome inside of the administration. There's going to be a shift of some sort, be it economically or otherwise, where popular opinion is going to start to sway, and the midterm elections may be in jeopardy for Republicans. But there's also this notion of, well, we can't wait. We have to do something right now. We're seeing, and again, this is a movement inclusive of people from the far left, whatever that is, through traditional conservatives that are going, and we're seeing this every day on the radio. I'm seeing it every day on my email. We're in conversation where people are going, wait a second, this is nuts. What's next?
Yeah, what's next? What's next is not the James Carville model.
Yeah.
We can't sit around and wait. Do I think that might happen? I actually do. I mean, I think history has shown that when you get characters like Trump and Musk, on the same page and in the same room, eventually one of their egos is going to get bruised enough where the other one's going to either throw them out or storm off in a huff. But that said, there is an energy out there. And it's a different kind of energy than we saw in 2016 and 2017, the first year of the Trump won. And you can feel it. There's a frustration and an anger with this strategy of waiting around. And, I've spoken with a number of labor leaders, and we were looking at, what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer did. And he was probably right on the policy, but on the politics, I think he was just dead wrong. And I think the energy that we're seeing out there in the public, whether it's in Rhode Island, New York, or red states like Montana or South Dakota or Idaho, people don't like what they're seeing. Even if they think that government should be reduced in size, even if they think certain programs should be changed or even eliminated, there is a process that we go through. It's a democratic process. It's not always pretty and it's not always efficient. But the day after our rally, there was a second rally at the State House that was organized by the National Association of Letter Carriers. There are 700 postal workers across the country who are facing privatization because Musk is threatening to privatize their jobs. Now, many of those workers are veterans. And many of those workers service rural areas, including here in Rhode Island. It's just not a moneymaker to service a place like Foster compared to a place like Providence. So what's going to happen to the people of Foster or Gloucester or Exeter? Or pick your local community in a different state. Is it going to be inefficient to deliver the mail to them so they're just not going to get the mail? That's the things that are at stake. We can't run government like a business. It's not a profit-making entity. And by the way, from some of the corporations I've seen, they're not exactly the most inefficient entities out there either. I mean, I think this notion that the Musks of the world are trying to get across, that corporations and corporate, ways of doing business are the efficient model. I don't see that nearly as often as they do. In fact, I see it in the complete opposite. And you can see it, by the way, all of the money flows up to the top. It gets concentrated in a few hands. And the people that work for major corporations, whether they're middle management, lower management, working class, doesn't matter. They're left doing all of the work. And I think that's not a way to run government.
For sure. And one thing as well is persuasion is, look, labor feels like it's center of gravity for persuading people who are, for whatever reason, think that everything that's happening right now is wonderful and effective and that we should run government like a business. It feels like labor is a place that can actually reach into some of these pockets of Trump voters or Trump supporters, and not even Trump supporters, people who are on board with this mode, the Trump 2.0 thing that's happening, which is a very vague way of putting everything that's happening with Elon Musk and the chaos, this policy of chaos. What role do you see yourself and labor in general playing in swaying the opinion of those workers that, for whatever reason, believe that what's happening benefits them when, in fact, it on paper and in practice simply does not?
Yeah, I believe that we are built for this moment. The labor movement is built for times like these. because we have the ability to have conversations with workers across the political spectrum, across identity spectrums. I was at a coffee meeting earlier this morning at a state facility, and sitting around the table were white workers, black workers, brown workers, older workers, younger workers. No one talked about whether they were Christian or atheist, Jewish or Muslim. It didn't matter. We were talking about the same issues that impact all of us. And it's an issue, by the way, that's going to be in the news, over the next couple of days. The state of Rhode Island is about to give a new raise to a lot of department heads in the state. And I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but the rank and file workers have been waiting to have what's called these public hearings to take care of some of their adjustments as well. And our members are being told, well, we have to wait until some new computer systems are put in place.
Yeah.
Why are we always the ones that have to wait? That's a frustration for working class people, regardless of who they voted for, who they identify with. And I think the labor movement is the only institution, organization, movement in America today that can bring all of those types of people together for a common cause. We've got to do more of it. I think we do a good job here in Rhode Island, and I know nationally we're doing a much better job today than we have in the past.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned those raises, because there's a conversation to be had about competitiveness and whether or not retaining talent as compared with the salaries in other states in the region or nationally or the private sector, whatever it is. I mean, you really can't compare private sector to public service jobs anyway, but it is an important discussion, because those rank and file members, for whatever reason, be it a computer system, be it just a pragmatic decision within the state's budget, it does seem like routinely labor is left behind in a discussion that they ought to be leaving. When we look to our labor history, we certainly know right here in our own backyard, the Industrial Revolution, and you can look around the world at labor movements worldwide. When labor gains power, as it has here, it ought to be able to have a co-equal seat at the table in terms of negotiation for profit. And right now, just an example of these department heads that are going to receive some, it's not humongous, but some raises. If labor's not getting that same raise, that right there is an example of a system that is not functioning as it ought to, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinions when you talk about the world that we ought to be living in. And that just plays in further to the gutting of the federal government by, a guy who's wearing a baseball hat in the Oval Office and is kind of making it into a joke of some kind. It just seems like a perfect storm to shrink the middle class.
It absolutely is. And Bill, we've been through this before in Rhode Island. I've been around long enough that I can remember, several past governors. And Don Carcieri, the last Republican governor, really broke state government. He broke it in a way so that it is deliberately inefficient. And, his successor, Link Chafee, probably dug the hole 10 feet deeper. Governor Raimondo couldn't find a ladder tall enough to climb out of the hole. And Governor McKee is still trying to figure out, does he fill the hole? Does he close the hole? Or what do we do to make it work? But you're right, though. That started 20 years ago here in Rhode Island. I tell people a lot. People don't understand how bad things were here 2005, 2006. Don Carcieri was one step away from being Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. He was such a bastard. I mean, he actually vetoed a bill that would have allowed same-sex couples to visit each other in the hospital.
Yeah, unbelievable.
When one of them was dying.
Yep.
Now, today, we take it for granted that if I'm gay and my husband is in the hospital and he's dying of cancer, I can go visit him. But back before we passed marriage equality, a simple human right like that was illegal in the state. And Don Carcieri got celebrated for it. And it took us 8 years from that before we passed marriage equality. So we've been struggling against this type of ideology for a long time. We've turned the page, I think, because we have a strong labor movement. We've got strong allies in the environmental movement, the progressive movement. We've done a lot of electoral work. We've got great leaders in office today that are working with us when they can. But it takes a lot of time and effort. And that's why the fight that we're seeing now across the country is something that we've got to continue, because it's not just about a protest at a Tesla dealership. It's about getting people there to sign up for the next event, to volunteer for the next election, to take action, even if it's as simple as going home and talking with your spouse, your kids, your friends about why it is important that we're doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, those culture war issues. And it's interesting you mentioned Kachiri because it's so important. I think a lot of people who are new to Rhode Island politics or maybe have a short memory don't realize the landscape. Forget about Trump, forget about Musk and all that. Even here locally, Kachiri, who nearly lost to Charlie Fogarty in 2006, he was really the only person who survived in terms of Republicans in that 2006 election. That's where we saw Chafee lose to White House and generally a national flip, largely driven by the Iraq War. But politically speaking, here in Rhode Island, we're in a very short amount of time, we were living in a culture war nightmare, and you raise that issue. I mean, what a thing to do to veto. And again, Kachiri, he ties it to a religious background. He's outspoken about this. So what? I mean, that's personal. That's your personal choice. But it sets a framework where, in tandem with the shrinking of the middle class and everything that's happening, these culture war issues become the place where people focus their attention. And we see it today in issues that, instead of focusing on the reality of the shrinking middle class, people are pitted against each other over what are really human rights issues that, in a vacuum, most people would say, well, I don't really care. I mean, it's common sense. Yeah, if two people of the same sex are married, they ought to have hospital visitation rights. Of course, who wouldn't say that? Or at least agree that it should be policy, even if not in their own life. So what role do you say, when you look at your membership, when you look at the picture right now, these culture war issues, how much do you position them as a distraction from the real work that's happening?
Bartholomew Town.
Birds are disappearing from our landscape at a rapid pace. Over 1/3 of those breeding on Audubon Society of Rhode Island's wildlife refuges are in decline. Climate change has taken a toll on their migration, nesting, and food sources. While science is highlighting the problem, Audubon is working on real solutions with a plan to rapidly reduce their carbon emissions. The organization will be free of fossil fuels by 2030, with renewable energy powering Audubon's buildings, equipment, and vehicles. To shape our future, all of us must act. Learn more about Repowering Audubon, their avian research, and how you can join their fight for climate resiliency. Visit asri.org/repower. Newport Film screens the latest, critically acclaimed documentary films year-round across Rhode Island. Like a film festival, Newport Film often gets early access to films before they're available online or in the theaters. Stay up to date on their latest screening events at newportfilm.com or on Instagram @NewportFilm. Are you looking to advance in your career or explore a new field? The University of Rhode Island now offers a comprehensive portfolio of fully online programs designed to bring world-class education to you anytime, anywhere. Choose from a wide range of flexible, asynchronous programs in business and leadership, data, tech, and STEM, healthcare and pharmacy, marine and environmental science, and more. With expert faculty and innovative courses, you'll gain the skills and knowledge to thrive in today's competitive world. Are you ready to take the next step? Visit uri.edu/online and discover how URI Online can help you achieve your goals. URI Online, learn anywhere with us. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communication, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience message and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org.
I don't think they're a distraction at all, but I think where the Democratic Party has strayed nationally over the last 10, 15 years, maybe even longer, maybe 50 years, is that they have not included working class issues and working family issues as part of the agenda. And I think I know the reason why. It's too hard. When you look at what's happened to the Democratic Party since Bill Clinton, maybe since Ronald Reagan took over, the things that workers care about, protecting their jobs, stopping privatization, stopping foreign trade from sucking out our jobs out of this country and going to low-wage areas. Things like national health care insurance, things like the right to organize. Those things are hard to do. Why? Because eventually the corporate class, whether they're Republican corporate class or Democratic corporate class, don't want them. So we focused as a party on these social issues because they were the easier option. They might not have been easy, but they were sure easy. It was sure easier to focus on protecting bodily autonomy than it was protecting the right to organize. Yeah. And I think a lot of working people are sympathetic to the social issues. And I personally don't think we should ever abandon things. I will, if someone wants to go after trans people's rights, they're going to have to come through me and my movement. But we also need to make sure that we expand the right to organize a union, that we have a tax system that doesn't punish working people and actually distributes the tax burden equally and fairly. When we talk about those issues, it's not an either-or proposition for me. It's about all of this and more.
Well said. Well said, and it's reassuring to hear that because it does seems dystopian right now. It seems like you've just got this engine of trying to undo progress from a labor standpoint, from the middle class standpoint, from an economic reality standpoint, as well as from a social justice standpoint, and then it becomes fodder for people on, some of these networks that are, you don't want to say conservative leaning, but kind of conspiracy leaning that just hit people. It's garbage.
It's propaganda. Yeah. Unfortunately, at the gym that I work out at most mornings, Fox News is on the TV. Yeah. So I get a chance to listen to it. I get the chance to listen to what they say. It is deliberately misleading by design. It's a half a story. It's just a nugget of truth about something that might be going on. And then they completely disorient people in terms of how they talk about it. And it's a deliberate marketing tool. And I think we've got to find ways to bust through that kind of thing. Because, listen, I watch the news. I watch Fox, CNN, MSNBC. And, from my point of view, when I hear people on Fox or people that watch Fox talk about how liberal CNN or MSNBC is, I'm like, what's your definition of liberal? Because They sound like moderate Republicans to me. And when you think about how that ideology has cornered the market in the media, so that if we ever want to talk about passing the PRO Act, which would revitalize workers' rights to form a union, that gets shunted off to the background, whether it's a left, quote unquote, left-leaning media source or a right-wing one. Why? Because the people that are running this country, the billionaire class, don't want us to have any power. It's why the first thing that Trump did was fire Gwen Wilcox, the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board. It's why before we even abandoned the right to choose by the Supreme Court, they made it all public sector workers' right to work in the Janus decision. They come after the labor movement first so they can soften the underbelly of resistance and then go after everyone else's human rights.
Yes. And the mainstream media, again, using that term, you all of a sudden sound like somebody who is a victim of this propaganda. But we'll say the corporate media, mostly, for the most part, is serving its corporate masters, whether it's, as you say, CNN or Fox. It generally is feeding that beast. We look back on labor movements of the past and the critical role that labor-driven press played, or liberal press, truly liberal press played. This in a time where you had yellow journalism happening, you had garbage, corporate journalism happening in some of the main spaces, newspapers at the time, mostly, and also radio. But we certainly have Steve Alquist out there in Rhode Island. We certainly have things that are happening in that space, but it is definitely not widely read by the average everyday person. And I think this is one of the major challenges of our time, is that we, no matter what, left, right, center, however the media is positioning itself, most people are consuming corporate first media. I even saw Ted Nesi from Channel 12 post something. Channel 12, WPRI, they do great work, the investigative work. They do a great job. But he posted something interesting. They're celebrating their 70th anniversary. He was like, well, as I was going through the archive, I noted that a television station is the history of a community. And I thought to myself, well, sure, it is in many ways, but it isn't, because there's so much that's left out of that history. Try telling that to people who've their stories have never been told, because frankly, it doesn't help sell mattresses to people in East Greenwich. We have a humongous gap in terms of telling the story. You need both the Channel 12s and something else to fill that gap. And you're spot on, because even at the local level, there's a breakdown of understanding the reality on the ground and what's really happening with the shrinking middle class.
100%. It's been funny. I mean, one of the things that's been in the news the last week, 10 days, has been the story of the film premiere of the kids from RISD that set up the apartment at the Providence Place Mall.
Yeah.
Great story. It's a quirky story. I get it. But that's been in every single media source for like 2 weeks.
Right.
I mean, it's an interesting little, thing, but there was one TV station that was at our protest rally on Saturday, and they covered us for about 90 seconds. So when you compare and contrast what's going on in Rhode Island and in the world, you're absolutely right, Bill. The focus has been lost. Now, we've taken a deliberate strategic approach to try to be more proactive with interacting in the media. And we've got a number of labor folks that are doing a great job. My sister, Stephanie Mandeville, who is the communications director at NERI, is just one of a number of people that are media savvy, do a great job getting the word out about what it is that the labor movement is fighting for. I've been a lot more visible and vocal and accessible to the media than some of my predecessors have been, deliberately so. And with their understanding that it's not a different way of doing things per se, or not a better way of doing things. It's just a different way, because we've got to get our word out in a way so that we're part of every single conversation.
I couldn't agree more. And hopefully we're trying to do that a little bit here on this show, and just sort of reposition things. And it's been a balance of an independent outlet that also has the vehicle of WPRO behind it, at least on the weekends and in the newsroom from time to time, where we can hit that more mainstream audience with these types of conversations. I think we need a lot more of it, though. Pat Crowley, AFL-CIO president, kind of a legend. I don't know if you'd like that title, but you're a legend, man. Thanks.
I don't know if I'm old enough to be a legend yet.
Yeah,
Bill,
well, okay. Well, a legend, not emeritus, whatever the opposite of that is.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.